Einen wunderschönen guten Morgen zum zweiten Tag der Agile Austria hier im grünen Herz von Österreich in der Steiermark. Wie wir hier ganz deutlich, wie soll ich sagen, die Effekte der hybriden Konferenz sehen, anscheinend hat sie alles das erste Mal da, nehme ich an, weil letztes Jahr haben die Teilnehmer Folgendes gemacht. Nach dem Mingle gestern, und vielleicht kann die Regie mal auch den Raum hier zeigen, haben einige Teilnehmer beschlossen, sich die Keynote vom Hotelzimmerbett aus anzusehen. Das ist natürlich klar, als Newbies lernt man halt dann die Best Practices immer erst an dem Weg. Das könnt ihr dann alles das nächste Mal gerne machen. Nichtsdestotrotz möchte ich auch euch ein bisschen gegenseitig aufwecken lassen, da mal ein bisschen die Gedanken anregen. Vielleicht haben wir hier weite Distanzen, aber schaut mal nach links und rechts. Begrüße euch mal wieder, genau. Es sind doch einige hier. Und fragt euch mal, ja, was war denn gestern am ersten Tag, was euch beeindruckt hat? Ja? Jetzt. Also wirklich so, hallo, mein Name ist Peter, mein Name ist Julia. Und auch für euch, ja, online, die wieder remote zugeschaltet haben, bitte schreibt uns doch in den Chat rein, was hat euch gestern am meisten beeindruckt oder fasziniert? Ja? Agilität hat auch manchmal die Möglichkeit, neue Lebendigkeit in eine Kultur, in eine Firma zu bringen. Lieber Markus, gibt's Reaktionen? Lass uns mal bitte ein, zwei hören.
Also einen gibt es im Chat.
Ein bisschen lauter.
Christian schreibt 5 Talks zu unterschiedlichen Themen, die alle für sich sehr beeindruckend und interessant waren.
Danke. Hast du noch eine?
Leider nein. Nur einer.
Ach so, okay, gut. Dann müssen die Leute anscheinend noch wach werden. Gut. Es wirkt wie eine Kaffeepause, das heißt, es mingelt und es rumort, ist an und für sich immer ein gutes Zeichen. Anscheinend war hier sehr viel Begeisterung. Da, sehr schön. Der nächste Programmpunkt ist natürlich auch wieder mal uns anzuschauen, was gestern passiert ist. Ja? Also, wir haben uns das ein bisschen angeschaut, wie so eure Stimmungen waren. Und es geht hier natürlich nicht um mich, ja, sondern einen Kollegen daneben, ja, wo man sagt, dafür kann ich nichts, Chris. Ja. Aber auch ihr wart gestern da schon mit lachenden Gesichtern, mit interessierten Gesichtern, ja. Sogar Leute, die oldschool mit Pen and Paper mitschreiben, ja, und dann auch im Mingle. Ja, hat es anscheinend gepasst, ein paar Schnappschüsse. Ja, genau. Und auch der Grund wahrscheinlich, warum einige heute von zu Hause streamen. So, jetzt würde ich gerne unsere Goldsponsoren nochmal danken. Es gibt 6 Firmen, die uns auch finanziell tatkräftig unterstützt haben. Und zwar Christina Rohrmoser und Stefan Wöhrer von den Lean Coders. Grüß euch. So. Was ihr wahrscheinlich im E-Mail überlesen habt, lasst das, genau, alles gut. Was ihr wahrscheinlich im E-Mail überlesen habt, ich habe unten hingeschrieben, nachdem ich rappe, müsst ihr das auch tun. Wenn hier kein Nein kommt, nehme ich das als okay auf. Habt ihr das gelesen? Fix nicht. Gut, viel Spaß.
Ja, hallo, Test. Wunderschönen guten Morgen allerseits, in alter Frische sozusagen. Ich hoffe, ihr seid schon ein bisschen munter. Denn die Christina und ich, wir haben eine Frage für euch mitgebracht. Wir machen jetzt seit mindestens einer Dekade Scrum und die Frage ist, sind die Projekte jetzt alle in Time eigentlich so oder in Budget und sitzen wir eh nicht irgendwie in Meetings, wo wir eh nichts oder nicht viel beitragen und das Meeting ganz wertvoll für mich ist? Ist Scrum gescheitert? Nein, glaube ich nicht. Scrum ist ein wundervolles Tool, ein sehr mächtiges Werkzeug, aber es ist wie eine Bohrmaschine. Wenn ich die nicht an Strom anstecke, dann wird es nicht funktionieren. Wenn ich kein Benzin einfülle, dann wird man das 500 PS Sportscar auch nicht weit und schnell fahren. Und das ist so ein bisschen die Frage, die sich mir oft stellt, und ich habe mit einigen Leuten schon geredet, es wiederholt sich ja immer wieder. Wo sind die Probleme in den Projekten? Ja. Und wir haben heute 12:15 Uhr hier in diesem Saal einen Talk für euch vorbereitet, wo wir der Sache ein bisschen auf den Grund gehen und wo es darum geht, was ist eigentlich Lean, wie passt es zusammen mit Scrum? Christina, um was geht es denn da?
Ja, ganz kurz, wir wollen nicht zu viel verraten. Im Grunde genommen, ich denke, jeder von euch hat schon mal von Lean gehört, Lean Management, Lean in der Softwareentwicklung. Und uns geht es eigentlich darum, mit Lean als Philosophie mal euch so ein bisschen näher zu bringen. Warum tun sich Lean und Agilität eigentlich nicht ausschließen und warum ist eigentlich Lean so ein bisschen der Treibstoff, der hinter Agilität steht?
Dankeschön. Wir sind die Lean Coders. Wir sind eine Softwareentwicklungsagentur mit Sitzen in Österreich und der Schweiz. Wir fokussieren uns auf Individualentwicklung für Business-Software im Web- und Mobile-Bereich und wir würden uns freuen, mit euch um 12:15 Uhr, wie gesagt, hier brainstormen und ein bisschen drüber nachzudenken, wie können wir unser Game aufs nächste Level bringen. Vielen Dank, ich wünsche euch eine schöne Messe.
Vielen, vielen lieben Dank. Dankeschön. Danke dir. Als nächstes bitte Angelika Klöbel-Teusel und Kollege, oder kommst du alleine? Alleine, okay. Von Beyond Now, bitteschön. Einen herzlichen Applaus. Dankeschön.
Ja, hallo, ich bin von Beyond Now. Wer ist Beyond Now? Wir sind ein Softwareunternehmen in der Nähe von Graz. Wir haben ungefähr 250 Leute weltweit beschäftigt, 180 davon in Österreich. Wir haben ein Produkt, das nennt sich, das ist eine digitale Plattform und das hilft unseren Kunden, damit diese ihren Kunden dann ihre Services, Produkte und so weiter zur Verfügung stellen können. Wir machen das als Produkt, aber auch Individualanpassungen und enablen mittlerweile auch unsere Partner und auch Kunden, dass sie das selbst machen können. Was gibt es noch zu sagen? Wir haben draußen einen Stand, also bitte kommt uns besuchen. In der Nähe des WCs, also vielleicht muss ja jeder mal vorbeigehen, bleibt einfach stehen. Ja, und wir haben uns vor 15 Jahren auf die Reise begeben, auf die agile Reise und so wie vorhin die Frage, ich stimme komplett zu, es ist noch nicht erledigt, es wird nie erledigt sein, es zahlt sich immer aus. So, ich hoffe, ich habe jetzt nichts vergessen. Dankeschön.
Danke dir. So. Die nächsten Goldenen, darf ich die Leute von der Netconomy oder Leute von der Netconomy? Veronika Stubbings.
Ja, genau. Sogar richtig ausgesprochen. Vielen Dank.
Bitte schön. So, ja, da, bitte. Ja, gut. Wenn sie sagt.
Genau, ich gebe dir so ein Zeichen. Dankeschön. Ja, einen wunderschönen guten Morgen von meiner Seite, von Netconomy. Wir sind sehr, sehr stolz drauf, hier bei der fantastischen Agile Austria Goldsponsor zu sein. Wer ist Netconomy? Was machen wir? Wir sind spezialisiert auf digitale Plattformen für großartige Customer Experience. Und wir machen auch nicht nur Software Development, aber auch Consulting. Das heißt, wir entwickeln gemeinsam mit unseren Kunden digitale Strategien, Innovationsconsulting, aber auch agile Transformation. Und da komme ich auch zu unserem nächsten Punkt. Was macht uns stark? Natürlich müssen wir praktizieren, was wir predigen. Wir arbeiten schon lange agil bei Netconomy. Natürlich, je nachdem, wie unser Kunde aufgestellt ist, suchen wir die Schnittstellen und schauen, dass wir hier optimal zusammenarbeiten. Unsere Teams an sich sind agil aufgestellt und wir pflegen eine sehr offene und partizipative Arbeitskultur. Wir sind eigentlich auch ein ziemlich interessantes Unternehmen. Graz-based, aber international tätig an über 10 Standorten. Wir haben auch aktuell ein paar interessante Rollen ausgeschrieben, auch Scrum Master. Wer sich jetzt hier interessiert für die Rolle, wir stehen draußen bereit und informieren auch gerne mehr über die Möglichkeiten, Entwicklungsmöglichkeiten und auch noch ein bisschen Werbung in eigener Sache. Um 11:15 Uhr gibt es einen Talk von mir zum Thema Product-Driven Organization, das ist ein Thema, das mich sehr umreißt, eigentlich über meine gesamte Karriere hinaus und aktuell gerade bei uns in Kundenprojekten besonders relevant ist und ich würde euch gerne heute auf eine kleine agile Reise mitnehmen. Vielen Dank.
Dankeschön. Dann von der Firma Wirecube Florian Becker. Herzlichen Applaus bitte. Dankeschön.
Hallo. Ja, was soll man viel sagen? Großartige Veranstaltung, die wir jedes Jahr gern unterstützen, weil es nicht nur für einen guten Zweck ist, sondern weil diese antikommerzielle Ausrichtung irgendwie macht, dass man da weniger das Gefühl hat, dass wir nur was verkaufen, sondern es geht um die Sache. Deshalb in doppelter Hinsicht immer gern und schaut draußen bei der Bushaltestelle und sonst wo, ob ihr unsere neuen Plakate seht.
Gut zum Bündig. Danke dir. Dann haben wir noch als Unterstützer das Agile Mastery Institut. Leider konnten hier die Leute aus krankheitlichen Gründen nicht vorbeikommen und der Talk wurde leider auch abgesagt. Und unser letzter Sponsor sind eigentlich zwei, das habt ihr sehr geschickt gemacht, und zwar Jürgen Menhardt von Transformation Now und sein Partner von der Agile Lean GmbH. Herzlichen Applaus und danke auch für eure Unterstützung. Ja.
Guten Morgen zusammen. Ich komme aus Köln und bin da Mitveranstalter der Product People. Eine ähnliche Veranstaltung, wie ich die hier gerade genießen darf. Also Kompliment, tolles Format, tolle Menschen. Ich fühle mich hier ganz gut aufgehoben. Und als ich heute Morgen meditiert habe, habe ich mir überlegt, dass ich mit euch ein kleines Experiment starten möchte. Vielleicht könnt ihr euch darauf einlassen, um mit mir eine Minute in diesen wundervollen, ewigen Moment zu kommen. Und unser Thema ist Agilität mit Herz. Und es gibt von Schopenhauer den Satz, was das Herz nicht durchlässt, kommt im Verstand nicht an. Was das Herz nicht durchlässt, kommt im Verstand nicht an. Und vielleicht könnt ihr eine Minute eine Hand aufs Herz legen, eine auf den Kortex, Augen schließen, einfach mal in euer Herz und in euren Verstand hineinspüren, ob da was passiert. Herzlichen Dank. Herz-Hirn-Kohärenz. Herz und Hirn in Einklang bringen. Vielleicht ist es euch gelungen. Vielleicht übt ihr es auch noch ein bisschen. Unser Motto, und da mag ich eigentlich einen Österreicher zitieren, die richtigen Dinge tun. Die Dinge richtig tun. Peter Drucker. Und wir ergänzen das noch gemeinsam, freudvoll die richtigen Dinge richtig tun. Das ist unser Motto. Und mir war dieser Moment der Stille ganz wichtig, weil der Jürgen eine ganz wichtige Botschaft an euch hat und die einfach nicht in dem ganzen allgemeinen Geplänkel untergehen darf. Jürgen.
Danke, lieber Heinz. Guten Morgen von meiner Seite auch. Building Bridges, das Motto dieses Jahr Beyond Frameworks spricht mir aus dem Herz, uns aus dem Herz. Wir haben Brücken gebaut, der Heinz und ich, einerseits auch generationsübergreifend und zwischen Deutschland und Österreich. Und mein Motto ist, am Anfang braucht es Begeisterung und Emotion und für den Erfolg Fokus und Disziplin. Das gehört für Startup, das gehört für Transformationsprojekte, das gehört für, wenn du Halbmarathon laufst, was auch immer. Und als Keynote-Speaker darf ich das machen auf den Bühnen dieser Welt, verschiedensten Dingen und auch bei den Transformationsbegleitungen. Und zwei Dinge möchte ich heute unbedingt euch mitgeben. Und da bin ich dankbar, dass ich es kann. Bitte schön. Mir ist wichtig, danke, auch Impulse zu geben. Und mein aktuelles Buch heißt Trust or Nothing. Das ist eine Geschichte über eine junge Projektleiterin, die Lena, in meinem Kopf so 31, die mit ihrem Team eine New Work-Geschichte erlebt. Das heißt, mit kleinen Impulsen auch erlebt, was das ist. Und mir ist ganz wichtig, es ist keine Raketenwissenschaft, was wir da machen. Das können wir jeden Tag einfach tun, jeder für sich starten. Und der Verein Steirer mit Herz unterstützt mich da, das heißt, der Bucherlös geht 1:1 direkt an diesen tollen Verein und er unterstützt vor allem Kinder mit schwersten Erkrankungen auf ihren Weg und zum Beispiel auch Krebserkrankungen, und das geht mir sehr nahe, auch jetzt wieder nach vielen Jahren. Wir haben unser zweites Kind an Krebs verloren und einen dritten Buben gekriegt, der ist jetzt gesund. Und wenn dieser Bucherlös ein Zauberlächeln auslöst bei diesen Kids, dann ist es super. Und für euch vielleicht ein paar Impulse in eurer Umgebung. Und noch was uns wichtig ist, ganz frisch, vor 3 Wochen eine Idee in Irland, in einem Cottage bei meinem Urlaub. Bauen wir Brücken, Building Bridges, Blue Bridge Award. Es gibt so viele tolle Dinge, was ihr alle zusammen macht, was vielleicht in der Softwarebranche wer kennt, aber keiner in der Finanz, Gesundheit, Logistik, whatever. Bühnenshow. Ich habe gerade geredet mit einem Kollegen aus der Medienwelt. Building Bridges, das heißt, der Award ist dafür da, nominiert Menschen, Personen, Unternehmen, Führungskräfte, Speakerinnen, New Work, Agilisten, weil ihr sagt, hey, das muss in die Sichtbarkeit, das ist so wertvoll. Das ist eine einfache Nominierung über unsere Homepage, wo der Johannes uns unterstützt, danke als Herausgeber auch, und die Carola Sakotnik. Es gibt dann ein Online-Voting von euch für Stimmen, also ja, bitte unbedingt, und einen kleinen Award dann im nächsten Jahr im Jänner. Und auch da der Zweck auch ist für den Verein. Wir haben uns ausgemacht, pro 500 Stimmen gehen 50 € an den Verein Steirer mit Herz. 2 Dinge eben, Impulse zu geben, schaut an, da gibt es einen Impulsgeberin, einen Impulsgeber, eine Agilistin, die was da Wundervolles möglich macht, und einen kleinen Impuls vielleicht für ganz, ganz viele Zauberlächeln für tolle Kids. Dankeschön.
Dankeschön. Gut, zu den langweiligen allgemeinen Dingen gibt es zum Glück nicht 2. Gibt es ja nur 2. Der Track D, Achtung, hat seinen Platz geändert. Wir sind heute im Gläuberzimmer. Genau, und damit es nicht zu wenig zum Ansagen gibt, bitte wieder die Achtung drauf, bitte nichts auf die Wände kleben. 4. Stock, Dankeschön. Jetzt ist es so, wir sind, glaube ich, etwas vor unserer Zeit. 9 Minuten. Ist der Karim schon hier? Ja. Liebe Konferenzorganisation, sollen wir früher anfangen oder? Nein. Okay. Ein Kaffee geht noch. Dann haben wir jetzt einfach 10 Minuten Pause. Ja? Aber wir werden einfach euch wieder reingangen, aber wir haben jetzt einfach 10 Minuten Pause, weil mehr gibt es jetzt in der Früh nicht zu sagen. Dankeschön. Morgen zum zweiten Tag unserer Agile Austria Konferenz hier im grünen Herzen von Österreich, Steiermark in Graz. Quasi schon die zweite Eröffnung. Genau, ich werde jetzt auf Englisch wechseln, weil unser nächster Vortragender, unsere zweite Keynote, auch auf Englisch spricht. Deswegen, we are very proud that we can present Karim Harbott here at our Agile Austria conference. He's a leadership and business agility expert, entrepreneur, author, non-executive director, and international keynote speaker. Anywhere in the world, it seems for the past 20 years, he did complex agile transitions. And besides being a Scrum and Coach certifier, he's one of only a handful of people globally with a certified Agile leadership educator and the creator of the Agility Business Canvas. He will be here today with his talk, Enabling Business Agility, because for too long organizations have been focused on processes and tools rather than peoples and interactions. And it has been a shallow and ineffective transformations in his mind. So today he will discuss the value of business agility and how leaders can put a machinery in a company into place, an organizational operation system for agility and innovation. So please give him a heartily welcome for our remote connected keynote speaker, Karim Harbott.
Thank you for the kind introduction and good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you today. Sorry I can't be with you in person. I've been in Amsterdam for the first half of the week. It's a story of two conferences for me this week. Amsterdam with the Scrum gathering until Wednesday, and I'm back here in London now with you remotely today, so it's awesome to be there, and I hope everyone has enjoyed what they've seen so far. Let's see if Friday can match Thursday. So I'm going to walk you through a few thoughts that I have about business agility and how to enable business agility in your organization. So I'm going to have some slides up so you can look at those instead of looking at me, because they're probably more interesting than I am, and I will talk over the top of them. So if you will allow me to share my screen, I will begin now. I want to start by talking about this organization here, GNK Aerospace. It's a British aerospace company, and it was founded in 1759, so some time ago. It's got some longevity now. It's an aerospace company that was founded in 1759. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, there was no aerospace industry in 1759. Well, you'd be absolutely right, because the Wright brothers, in fact, didn't make their first flight until 1903. So how on earth could an aerospace industry, aerospace company exist before airplanes did? And the answer to that question is that they were not always an aerospace company. They actually began life as a coal mine company, mining coal, digging coal out of the ground, and very quickly became the biggest supplier of iron during the Industrial Revolution. So they pivoted from coal to iron. After that, they began to make fasteners and became the biggest supplier of fasteners during the start of the 20th century. That's bolts and screws and nails. And quickly after that, they began making parts for auto vehicles, for cars and lorries. And soon after that, they began making parts for aeroplanes before moving into becoming one of the biggest aerospace companies. Fast forward to 2017, and GNK employs 58,000 people and has revenues of almost $10 billion. Now, this is a story of reinvention, of innovation, and of evolution of this organization. And I'd like to talk about that today, because if you want to survive and thrive for not just 10 years, not just 20 years, but 200 years and beyond, then you need to master this. Your organizations need to master this. So how do they do it? Well, I'm going to be talking about that. What am I going to be talking about? Well, firstly, what is business agility? We're going to be answering that question. It's many different definitions are out there. I'm going to talk to you about my definition. We're going to talk about why business agility and innovation is so important for long-term survival, just like G&K. How can we have that kind of longevity and success? And finally, and probably most importantly, I'm going to talk about how leaders can create the organizational operating system for business agility and for innovation. What do I mean by the organizational operating system? I can put the pieces in place in the organization to allow it to flourish. So we're going to go through all of those things. This is me. You don't really need to know any more. I had a lovely introduction, and I won't say any more about that. I'm just going to move straight into the interesting stuff. So if we go back many hundreds of thousands of millions of years, what we find is there are a significant number of giant creatures out there. This woolly mammoth is just one of them. There was a 2-ton wombat that used to lumber around the outback of Australia. Go back even further than that, and you have a Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, giant dinosaurs. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there is a competitive advantage to being bigger in the natural world, particularly for mammals and reptiles. So what is the competitive advantage of being bigger? Well, you can store more resources and survive the lean times. You can travel greater distances to get access to resources, to food, to whatever it is you need. You can fight off others of your own kind. You can fight off predators. You can more easily catch prey if you are a carnivore. So actually being bigger and being stronger is a competitive advantage, and the evidence suggests that we do evolve bigger and bigger over time. Our ancestors were about 4 foot tall. We are significantly bigger, so that advantage is real. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, hang on a minute, the 2-ton wombat is extinct. The woolly mammoth is extinct. The giant dinosaurs are extinct. If it's such a competitive advantage, why are these creatures not around anymore? And yes, it is a competitive advantage when the business or when the environment is stable. It absolutely is. However, 66 million years ago, an asteroid slammed into what is now about the Gulf of Mexico and set off a chain of events that led to the extinction of 3/4 of life on Earth. That's animals and plants. That's a lot of stuff disappearing. Now, when we look and analyze the animals that survived, what we find is almost nothing was greater than 25 kilograms. Most things were around 5 kilograms. Ground-dwelling birds, small rodents, small mammals, small reptiles, they were the ones that were able to survive and thrive. These big animals were not. Now, why? Because they could find shelter, they could forage for food, because they could reproduce more quickly, and they could more easily adapt to the changing environment. So we now have to update our mental model to say that big isn't necessarily better. However, it's better when the environment is stable. When the environment changes dramatically, it's not the survival of the biggest and strongest, it's survival of those most able to adapt. And they tended to be the smaller, nimbler creatures. So we have a sort of two models here, one that works well when the environment is stable, one that works well when the environment is changeable. And the business world mirrors this natural world. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that now. Before we do anything, I'd like to introduce the concept of exploring and exploiting. Okay, these are the things you'll hear about. Explore and exploit quite a lot. Exploiting is when we are executing against our current products, services, and business models. This is business as usual. This is something organizations are pretty good at. This is Coca-Cola making Coca-Cola. This is a drugs company making, manufacturing, packaging, shipping a drug that's already in the market. Processes are understood, predictable, plannable, focused is on reducing costs, increasing efficiency. Good things. Reproducible. Now, there's also, on the other side, organizations are exploring. Now, exploring is about creating new products, new services, new business models, things that don't exist yet. In short, it's about innovation. Now, this is highly unpredictable, highly experimental. You will fail a lot, and it's about learning, not about efficiency. So that same drugs company that is efficiently creating drugs that are in the market is actually trying to find new drugs. In fact, it takes about 25,000 compounds to explore, to find 25 that go to clinical trials, to find 5 that make it to market, one of which will make money. So as you can see, if you are not comfortable with failure, you're not going to get very far at exploring. Now, every company is doing both of these things in different measures. Some will do more exploit, and some will do more explore, and some will be in the middle doing both. And it's an interesting topic because it turns out that it makes quite a big difference on your ability to survive and thrive over time. Now, if we go back to the 20th century, it was almost all about exploiting with efficiency. The production line, the Industrial Revolution, that is, make the car more cheaply, more quickly than your competitors can. That's how you survive. Yes, there was some innovation as well, but not very much. It was probably 80 to 90% exploiting with about 10 to 20% exploring going on there. Henry Ford, the moving assembly line, the Model T, they survived, they thrived because of their efficiency, their ability to do the same thing over and over again in this stable business climate. He made the Model T for nearly 20 years, and it was an incredibly well-selling car. Now, if you think about this time, 20th century, Industrial Revolution, this is where most organizations are going from small to very big. So all of the structures and the cultures and the management styles that we see spring up in this context of plannable, repeatable work, of exploiting. And very few grew up around innovation and exploring, which is why the organizations are as they are in the world. Now, that was true throughout the 20th, so the late 19th century, and throughout most of the 20th century. However, the last quarter of the 20th century, from the 70s onwards, what we see is things start to change. And they've continued to change into the 21st century, and in 2023, they are incredibly different from that context. What happened? Well, there is this thing called VUCA, which appeared sort of in the 90s in the sort of military colleges of the US, stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Now, I won't dive too deeply into these other than to say that the world has seen a massive increase in VUCA. Technological change, greater interconnectedness, lower barriers to entry, deregulation has led to hyper competition and innovation. Social media, the interconnectedness of the world, and financial markets. Now, volatility is the pace of change, the increased pace of change. It turns out we are changing at around 10 times the pace we were during the Industrial Revolution, on a scale of 300 times, which gives you a total impact of 3,000 times the change today versus that Industrial Revolution. So to give you some numbers from McKinsey there, believe them if you choose to do that. Uncertainty is our inability to make predictions. It's hard to know what's going to happen in the future. You know, you go back 20 years, we probably couldn't have predicted the financial crash of 2008, a certain silly country leaving the European Union in 2016. Sorry about that. The global pandemic, the wars that we've seen in Europe and various other things. Difficult to predict this stuff. So uncertainty is our inability to predict the future. Complexity is the interconnectedness of the world, and the fact that everything is interconnected and complex, and the ambiguity is our inability to know what's going on in the world right now. So much information, but it's difficult to get a handle on what's going on right now. So many valid interpretations of the world. This is a very quick introduction to VUCA. You're probably familiar with it anyway, but this has changed the game. This has turned a stable business environment into an unstable business environment. Here are some charts for you. I'm not going to labor on chart. I'm going to break the cardinal rule and show you two graphs back to back. In short, new technology is being adopted more quickly than ever before, and big organizations are being grown more quickly than ever before. What these two charts should tell you is that there might be an organization out there that you've never heard of, leveraging a technology that you've never heard of, and it could disrupt your business, not in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, but in 10 months or 20 months or 30 months. And this should be a sobering thought to leaders all over the world. The speed with which ChatGPT has emerged, and I hadn't even heard of ChatGPT in December. I think over Christmas I read about it, I played around with it, thought it was cool, and then boom, here we are, 8 months, 9, 10 months later, and AI is everywhere. The same with WhatsApp and its ability to destroy the revenue of lots of telcos, who used to charge you to send a text message, if you remember, paying 5 pence or 5 cents or even more maybe to send a text message. That revenue disappeared overnight. So why do I say this? To set the scene, well, because for me, VUCA is our 21st century extinction event. It's the asteroid that slammed into the Earth, and it's setting off a chain reaction. It's turned a stable environment into an unstable environment, which means big organizations that survived and thrived through economies of scale, economies of scope, and efficiency, and the ability to do the same thing over and over again, well, they don't get to survive just because they're good at that now. Because they need to be able to explore as well. They need to be able to innovate new products, new services, new business models. They need to be adaptive and responsive now because the world changes more quickly than it ever has. So from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, all the way to where we are today, this VUCA has got bigger and bigger, more and more pronounced, and therefore we need to be more adaptive and responsive than ever before. Not just at the software level. Agile 1 is about software teams. Agile 2 is about teams of teams and scaling Agile. Agile 3 is about whole organization business agility, because every product, every service, every business model has a shelf life. I don't care if you're Amazon, I don't care if you're Google, I don't care if you're Microsoft, your products and services have a shelf life. And that shelf life just got way shorter. So what would have seen you make money for 50 years before will now see you make money for 8 or 9 years. Right? So you better have a plan for what happens beyond that. And this is the last graph I will show you, I promise. You can see here the average tenure, you've probably seen this before, has gone from 61, average tenure on the S&P 500, 61 down to 15 years. In short, doing the same thing over and over again will give you much shorter rewards. You don't need to hear about all of these because you're probably familiar with them. These organizations did not disappear because they were badly run. They were good at exploiting. They just didn't explore. So that should send a message to us. Now, what is business agility? This is my rather long definition of business agility, the ability to respond quickly and easily to change in order to maximize delivery value. That second part's important to me, in order to maximize the delivery of value. So responding to change, yes, so that you can deliver more value to customers in an increasingly turbulent business climate, adapting, improving, and innovating to continually stay ahead. Now, these are the things that the most effective organizations on the planet do. If you think about those organizations, does Amazon do this? Yes, it does. It started off as a book retailer. Now it sells everything. Now it has AWS. Now it has Kindle. Now it has Alexa. Now it has Amazon Digital. What's the next thing? Same with Tesla, same with SpaceX, same with Netflix, same with Microsoft. These organizations, same with Apple. How do I forget Apple? All right, these organizations are not just good at what they do, they're good at creating the next thing as well. Now, how many traditional organizations can you say that of? So here's the problem. Tell you the problem, and then I'll tell you the solution, or certainly my view of the solution. We're good at the stuff on the left here. We are good at exploiting, understanding processes, practices. Like if you've done an MBA, if you run an organization, you're probably really good at executing. But guess what? We're not so good on the right. And that's because the tools and techniques and cultures and structures and policies that work on the left just flat out don't work on the right. And when we try to have a one-size-fits-all for our organization, we find ourselves stifling the innovation side. Now, it's interesting to me. Now, you might say, well, why did no established music company create Spotify? Because they're too busy exploiting and not exploring. Why did no established transportation company create Uber? The same reason. Why did no established car company create electric cars? Well, it took a disruptor to really create roadworthy electric cars. They're doing it now because they have to. Right? But organizations typically don't focus on this stuff. So let's talk about what we need to do in the organization to not only get good at explore, because we need to stay good at exploiting too. Actually, we need a dual operating model, and I'll show you what that looks like. So, good friend of mine, who he would have been his birthday, where he's still with us, Mike Beadle, a couple of days ago. We lost him way before his time, but he used to say this to me all the time. It's easier to grow a unicorn than to transform a dinosaur. Maybe that's why the big car companies didn't create the electric car. It took a unicorn to do that. It took Elon Musk's Tesla to reinvent the car industry. That's why he reinvented the space travel industry and NASA did not, because it is in some ways easier to grow a unicorn than to transform a dinosaur. Now, the problem is most of us, me included, are in the business of helping traditional bureaucratic organizations to be more agile. Let's put it kindly and not call them dinosaurs. But we are in the business of coaching dinosaurs to evolve, and therefore we need to think about how we do that. And the next part is going to focus on exactly how we do that. So I'm going to show you a couple of reasons agile initiatives fail, and then I'm going to deep dive into a couple of them. Okay, the first one is a lack of commitment. In 1519, Hernan Cortes set sail from Spain over the Atlantic in what was a treacherous journey, and his orders were to land in what is now Mexico and to conquer the Aztec Empire and to plunder their riches. Now, bear in mind, he set sail with 500 men, 500 soldiers. And 100 sailors, right? So there were 600 of them in total. 600 of them against the whole Aztec Empire. So when they landed there, you might say, here's what I would have done if I were him. I'd be like, oh, we're a bit outnumbered here. Why don't we have a go, see what we can do, and if we start to lose people, let's just jump back on the boats and sail back and say, oh, we tried, sorry about that. That's not what he did. What did he do? For those of you who are good with your history will know this already. He burnt the boats. This is a well-known saying now, certainly in the UK. He burnt the boats, and that gave you no plan B. There's no going back now. We have to go forward. We have to attack, or we are not going to survive. Now, this is an extreme example, of course, and I say it for effect. They actually did end up conquering the Aztec Empire, and they did end up sailing back many years later, obviously built some new boats, I imagine. But what I see in transformations is people don't go all in. They say, we're going to be agile, but if it's too hard, we'll just carry on doing things the way we do things. They keep that plan B. And as Arnold Schwarzenegger said, if you have having a plan B is planning to fail. Right, so that plan B, like there's no commitment, there's no going all in, there's no having skin in the game for these people driving the transformation. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we see. It's the first thing. The second thing for me is the wrong people leading the change. While middle managers, I don't think you're going to drive this with middle managers, and we'll talk about this in a minute. When you see the changes that need to happen, it's very unlikely that middle managers will be able to change this. Middle manager resistance, again, we can talk about this, how we change the system to bring middle managers along. I want to deep dive onto this too narrow a focus and a lack of a coherent approach. We focus in a narrow way that really doesn't allow us to get a holistic transformation. These shallow transformations are focused on processes and tools and technologies and frameworks. We just send our team on a Scrum class and they come back and we think, well, you're certified Scrum Masters now, everything's agile, and actually nothing else in the organization changes. And of course, that will never work. So let's dive in. And the analogy I like to use for this is that of installing an Android app on an iPhone. That's never going to work. And it's not because the Android app is bad. It's not because the iPhone is bad. It's because you have a compatibility issue there. So you will fail. Now, if you install new ways of working, be it Scrum, Safe, Less, Kanban, design thinking, lean startup, I don't care which one you like to choose. If you install that on a traditional organizational structure with traditional cultures and policies, that will also fail. Why? Because there is a compatibility issue with the new ways of working and your organization, because you haven't created the organizational operating system. As I said, these things are good. Don't get me wrong. You've probably heard some interesting talks about these things, and I teach these things, and I think they can be incredibly powerful techniques, or a lot of them can, but they're not going to help us right now. It's not where we should start. These are processes, practices, frameworks, tools, technologies. These are ways of working. On the left there, we have ways of working. That's what we mean. However, there are 5 other things we need to take into account, from leadership and management, culture, structures, people and engagement, governance and funding, all the way around. This is the stuff that makes the difference. And now for the rest of this talk, I'm going to outline what you can do in these areas. And then I'm going to finally, at the end, show you a tool that can help you bring this together. So how do we create the organizational operating system for innovation and agility? Well, you focus on all 6 of these. I'll start with leadership. We all know that leadership must evolve in organizations. We all know that Frederick Winslow Taylor, command and control, micromanagement, task focus isn't going to cut it. When the world is so complex, there is no way that one individual can have the cognitive capacity, the knowledge of all the work that's going on, the sheer physical presence to make all of the decisions themselves. And Gary Hamel says it quite nicely here. All right, so we are using industrial revolution management practices for the production line to try to innovate. It's not going to work. In terms of innovation here, what's the most impactful? Operational innovation, how we do our work. Okay, anyone can copy that. New products, new services, anyone can copy those. As Apple found out when it launched the iPhone, as Dyson found out when it launched the bagless vacuum cleaner, and as Tesla found out when it launched the electric car, if something's successful, everybody will copy you. Strategic innovation or business model innovation. Now, this is much harder to copy, but it's still copyable. This is Uber, this is Spotify, this is various things, Airbnb. Now, what's the most impactful type of innovation? Management innovation. And this comes from Gary Hamel's book, The Future of Management, by the way, if you want to know. Management innovation. There is a reason Toyota was the most profitable car company for 40 years. You can copy the Toyota production system. You can copy its production line. You can copy lean. What you can't copy is the culture and the management of Toyota. And again, you'll see that in about many organizations. So we need to reinvent how we do management to decentralize decision-making, to grow the capability of people around us, and to set the culture and the structures and then get out of the way. We know this. We talk about this all the time. People like David Marquet and intent-based leadership and catalyst leadership and servant leadership. This is a mainstay of the agile world. When it comes to culture, organizational culture, this is a big problem because most people don't understand the value of culture. They don't understand what culture is, and they don't understand how to change culture. So I'll give you a few of my thoughts on culture. I wish I could go more deeply. Now, what's interesting, again, we're going to talk about a bit of history here, is during the 90s, a wave of corporate failures were investigated by two McKinsey consultants. It's that company again, Kaplan and Foster. And they were interested in why some organizations fail and some organizations are able to succeed and to pivot. And they analyzed 36 years worth of data. What they found was this: the cultural lock-in, the inability to change corporate culture, that was the biggest problem. Because changing your strategy, changing your products and services is one thing, but if you don't change the culture of your organization, you will never be able to execute against that. You will never be able to do what G&K has done, and to go from being a coal miner to supplying steel, to making fasteners, to supplying auto parts, to supplying aerospace parts. You will never be able to evolve if your culture doesn't evolve. And that means we need leaders that can shape culture. Another little piece of research I find interesting, actually, this is a fascinating piece by John Cotter of Leading Change fame. It's not an interesting book, but the interesting findings. He said he wanted to know if there was a correlation between a strong culture and a competitive advantage. And the answer was no, interestingly. And then he said, well, how about a strong culture that is strategically aligned? Because your culture and your strategy need to be aligned. Nothing's going to eat anything for breakfast. They need to work together. So, no, that didn't work either. Okay, one last try. How about a strong culture that is strategically aligned, and we have leaders that are able to actively reshape culture as we evolve, as our products and services change, as our strategy changes. Now, it turns out that over those 11-year period, there was for companies that had these three things, there was a 901% increase in stock price compared to 74 for the average, and a 756 increase in net income, that's profit, versus 1% for the average. So in short, these are the things you need to survive and thrive in the long term. A strong culture that is strategically aligned, and leaders that can evolve that culture. We see the same with IBM over the years, right? Not just evolved its business lines, but it's evolved its culture in order to execute against them, which means leaders need to know how to reshape culture. They need to know how to create a culture that is aligned to what they want to achieve strategically, and that's really quite difficult. So in short, you don't change culture by changing culture. You change culture by, like a shadow on the wall, you don't change the shadow. You change the thing that causes the shadow. You don't change culture, you change the thing that causes the culture. And that is the behaviors in the organization. So you need to change the system to get people to behave differently, you need to reward and incentivize and change your policies and change your team structures and change your HR processes to make it more likely that the behaviors you want to see will emerge, and so will the culture you emerge. And that's a really difficult thing to do. It's a strong leadership capability. Moving on to structure now. And I'll do this one quickly because you know this. You know that moving from silos to cross-functional teams is incredibly important. You know that if you have teams of teams collaborating, they need to be able to interact and communicate and collaborate, and individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Scrum focuses on this, safe, less. Every agile framework focuses on creating the environment for autonomous, cross-functional, empowered, really great teams. But most organizations are still structured in silos of functional silos of testers and business analysts and programmers and production line mentality. And this is another thing you have to do in order to get where you want to go. The next one is what I call people and engagement. You can call this HR. But moving away from HR as just a bureaucracy of compliance and rules and processes, and towards one that really gives people, that inspires people. You're probably familiar with Dan Pink's autonomy, mastery, purpose, right? This is how we create the environment for engagement. Now, on engagement, these are some figures from Gallup. We've got 15% of people highly involved and enthusiastic about their work and workplace globally. Like Europe is worse because America is higher. So 33% in America. Western Europe is 10%. The UK is 11%. I mean, this is pretty bad numbers, because these are the people that make your organization successful. 2/3 of people, they show up, but they're not that interested. And 18% of people actively disengaged. What do you think that does to your organization when most of your people don't really care? And this is what happens when you make people work in soulless bureaucracies with rules and processes, and they have no autonomy, and there's no focus on what you're trying to achieve. People just zone out. I've done it myself. I'll just show up. I'll send some emails. I'll do some things. I'll go home, because it's the intrinsic passion and initiative and creativity that people bring is squashed. Now, this is an article from HBR where they looked at the performance of standard companies versus those that fall into the best places to work. You can see this high engagement leads to effective organizations over and over again. So this is why we focus on engagement. We want high performance. We want people to grow. We want people to be passionate. The last one I'm going to talk about, because I'm not going to talk about ways of working. We talk about those all the time. This is the environment. If we have, I know, and I get this, one of the number one things I get in my classes is this. You're talking about Scrum, you're talking about inspect and adapt and feedback, and how we operate in high uncertainty. Someone puts their hand up and they say, hey, Kay, in my organization, we have business cases with a fixed scope and a fixed time and a fixed date. And once that business case gets signed off, we get strict change control. So we have to decide everything up front, how we're doing it, what we're doing, and we can't change. And I said, yeah, that's because your governance is set up for plannable, predictable, waterfall work. Now, you can't be agile in that environment. You can try to pretend you can by calling it a hybrid, agile waterfall, but we all know that just means waterfall with some iterations in the middle. So for me, governance is one of the most important things. And it comes down to this. Do you believe you mitigate risk through upfront thinking and planning, or do you believe you mitigate risk through experimentation and adaptation? Now, in a complicated environment, sure, the first one, but any kind of complexity or volatility, any kind of VUCA, oopsie, I went backwards. There we go, press the wrong button. Any kind of VUCA, and you're not going to do very well with that. So a traditional funding model here looks at mitigating risk through upfront thinking and planning, through analysis, through business cases. And when the risk and uncertainty is high, bang, we throw all the money at it, then we execute. Probably at the end, we'll realize we did the wrong thing, and this is where the Agile movement came from. What does an Agile funding model look like? It looks like this. We instead of running a small number of big bets, we take a large number of small, cheap, fast experiments. We learn by spending a little bit. So we run the experiment, bring the risk and uncertainty down. When it comes down, we crank up funding. And only when it's come down, through being with our customers, through testing the market with MVPs, with lean startup, with experimentation, with prototypes. And then when we've tested the desirability, viability, feasibility of our product with data out of the building, then we can start cranking up the investment, maybe on a quarterly basis, instead of this big bang investment. This is a big governance change. This is a big finance change. And it's quite ultimately, it's one of the most important indicators of success in your agile transformation. In fact, the Business Agility Institute said it's the #1 factor for your organization, whether you're likely to be successful with agile. Do you have finance on board? And that's why it's one of the enablers. So they are 5 of the 6 enablers that create the organizational operating system. Finally, before I leave you, I want to show you this. It's a tool for avoiding these challenges. The narrow focus that we've just talked about, and the lack of a coherent approach, which is making sure every change you make is aligned with every other change you make and drives you towards the outcome you want. And when I used to work on transformations, and I still do, but not quite as much because I train a lot now, and I've worked on many big, messy transformations, and what I saw is a narrow approach, but then people would do things that were out of line. We'd have these change management approaches that I didn't like. So, and I shamelessly stole the bits I liked from various approaches, and I mixed that together with the business model canvas you may be familiar with by Alex Osterwalder, which visualizes the various elements of your business model. And rather unoriginally, I called it the business agility canvas. I just want to walk you through this and how this can help you on your transformation. So we start with the what and the why, right? Simon Sinek tells us we must start with why. What are we trying to achieve? How will we know we've achieved that? Why is this important to us? What's our vision? What are our values? What are the success criteria for this stuff? Then, how are we going to change? And then, what else do we need to think about? Because I couldn't think of an interesting thing to call this last one. What and why, how, and then what else, right? And this is an iterative approach, as you would expect from an agile transformation. So the what and the why is the vision. You start with the vision. Why? And again, John Cotter says this, lacking a vision is one of the reasons for change failing. And then what are the values that we are going to work into everything we do? What values does this organization hold? What are the success criteria? Now, lots of people push back on this, but we need to know, anyone who's coaching an organization we need to know what we're going to measure in order to know that we've got better. Like if you're training for a marathon, then you will measure how quickly you're running certain distances. You will track your speed. If you're a power lifter, you'll track how much you can lift. You'll track right. Well, if we're trying to get better here, we need to know what that means and how we quantify that. So get those up front. What are we aiming for? Then, of course, the how is the changes we're going to make across these 6 enablers of business agility here. So a culture assessment, where are we? Where do we want to be? What changes will we make in leadership and structure, in HR, in governance and funding, in our processes, practices, frameworks, tools, technologies? How do they sit together and play nicely together? And finally, what else? Our key partners, our key stakeholders. Who do we need to bring along internally and externally? Who's going to support us on this journey? Do we have vendors that need to change the way that they work? What are the key risks? What could go wrong that we believe we can mitigate? What obstacles are in the way that we need leaders to move out of the way? And you get around a table, or not around a table, around a wall, ideally. We print this as big as we can. We collaborate, we put stickies on it, we move it around. We meet at a cadence, whether it's every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks. We discuss how it's going, what support you need, and you discuss what you're going to do the next 4 weeks. Rather like using agile approaches to create an agile organization. Now, what I will say is you don't need to change the whole organization. You can change one product, one service, one business line, maybe sort of 2 to 8 teams working to deliver value in a value stream. You can make these changes there and leave the rest of the organization do it incrementally. And I think that's much more sensible. And I won't go into that. So that is free. You can download the Business Agility Canvas. It's Creative Commons. You can use it. You can mess around with it, do what you like with it. There's a 20-page guidebook that I put together to help you to implement that, to talk about some of the things we've talked about today. So please feel free to download the Business Agility Canvas. I have a free, and again, assessment tool to see how you're doing in your organization. Just 3 questions for each enabler, 18 questions, easy peasy, to show this organization clearly is struggling in governance and funding, so you can really get a map of where you need to focus. It's a lightweight tool, but it will give you an idea. Now, where can you find out more? Well, you can follow me, and I post a load of things, but I have stuff going on-demand classes, live classes, my book, The 6 Enablers of Business Agility, which I decided to write during lockdown for some unknown reason, but I'm very proud of it. So my thoughts are in there if you want to find out more. And if you want to connect with me, please feel free to scan this. This will take you to my link tree where you can connect to me on Twitter, on LinkedIn. All of my free tools are on there. My YouTube is on there. And my TikTok channel. Yes, I have a TikTok channel. I talk about Scrum, so clearly no one on TikTok is interested. But if anybody wants to hear me talk about really common questions that pop up on there, follow me on TikTok. You might double my following there, but I certainly have more followers on other platforms. And that's all I wanted to say to you. It is 8:45, so I just about kept to my time box. I appreciate your attention. Thank you for listening, and I hope that was useful, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. But that is all from me, folks. Thank you so much, and have a great Friday the 13th.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karim. So, just Karim, that you know our technical setup, either we speak or you speak, so speaking at the same time is technically not possible. So now you're muted, I'm sorry. But who has questions for Karim? I think he stunned the audience. Okay. In this case, do we have any questions from the chat? No? Okay. Then, well, Karim, thank you very much for your presentation, your talk. We send you lovely greetings from Austria, our Green Center of Europe in this case. And yeah, maybe see you on the next Agile Austria conference. Bei uns geht es dann weiter um 10 Uhr. Wir haben wieder einen geballten Tag vor uns mit ganz unterschiedlichen Topics wie eben, wann agiles Design fehlschlägt oder niemand verfügt über ein agiles Mindset. Also es ist ein Mix, eine bunte Mischung. Falls jemand interessiert ist an dem Buch, das Karim gerade vorgestellt hat, The 6 Enablers of Business Agility, Bearing Point hat wieder sein Gewinnspiel. Viel Spaß am zweiten Tag.